Governor Maura Healey is back in Massachusetts after a week-long trip to Dublin, where she courted tech jobs, pushed for broader trade ties, and celebrated the 30th anniversary of Ireland decriminalizing homosexuality.
The cause of human rights is woven through our shared history. We must stand strong and never go backwards. It was not so long ago when the story of Irish-American unity and the story of gay liberation would never have been told together.
Healey has never been one to shy away from the national spotlight, but this trip was her first time stepping onto the world stage as governor. And my colleague and this show's usual host, Adam Reilly, had a front row seat for it all. Adam, thanks for being here on the opposite side of the table.
Thanks for having me. Good to be back.
Yeah, and you're freshly back after a whirlwind week. And I'd like to start with kind of a high-level question for you. How will we know? There were a lot of goals laid out for this trip, different things going on. How will we know if it was successful, and when will we see that?
I think we won't know for a long time. If we're talking about success in terms of the push for stronger trade ties that you mentioned, I talked to Greg Bielecki, Governor Patrick's former economic development secretary, before Healey's trip, and he said, when you've got industries like the ones we have in Massachusetts, like the ones that they have in Ireland, for example, tech, clean energy, those were two areas that Healey was trying to hit on her trip. It can take a while for the conversations aimed at, for example, bringing an Irish company over to Massachusetts. It can take a while for those convos to bear fruit. He mentioned going to Israel with Governor Patrick and telling startups, hey, if you ever reach a point when you want to expand to the U.S. market, think about coming to Boston or to Massachusetts first. And he said that happened ultimately down the road, but it took a while for it to happen. So that was the how long argument. Remind me what the how long question. What was the other question?
What will success look like?
I think it would be, for example, let's say in a year, Governor Healey sends out a press release saying, hey, we're delighted to inform you that this big Irish tech company is making Boston the first place it's expanding to in the U.S., or this Irish tech company that already has offices in, 2 other cities is opening up a new Boston office. It's going to be their biggest one, and it's going to employ 100 people, and 50 of those jobs are expected to go to Americans. Those are just, hypotheticals, but I think that's the type of thing that would allow Healey to say, look at this trip I made was worth it, and it's actually going to redound to the benefit of people who live here in the state that I run.
Right, that's part of her mission on this trip, is to pitch Massachusetts as a place to do business. And the timing is kind of interesting. It comes the same week we saw the Healey team roll out these billboards in Florida and Texas,
super interesting,
highlighting Massachusetts as an inclusive and welcoming place, particularly for LGBTQ people. Was she operating off that same kind of inclusivity playbook abroad?
Very much the same general script, and she was also operating off the script that she's been using for her first half year as governor just here domestically, because we've heard her say, you and I have talked about this before just in the office, how it seems like any time she makes a public appearance and is talking about other states, she'll say, hey, if you're living in Florida, or if you run a business in Florida, and if you maybe don't like what Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida, think about coming here. Right, if you're Disney, say, and want somewhere that maybe doesn't have the best weather, it doesn't have weather that's as good as Florida, but if you like Massachusetts' commitment to abortion rights, commitment to LGBTQ rights, the way we treat immigrants here, think about coming to Massachusetts instead. She was making a similar case in Ireland, but with a little bit of a different twist. The case there was basically, hey, Ireland has become a place in the last 10, 15 years that is very much in line with where we are when it comes to values in Massachusetts. You were the first country in the world to legalize same-sex marriage in 2015. You legalized abortion for the first time in 2018 in this landslide election. If you are looking to set up shop in the United States, think about Massachusetts, because we're right on the same page as you when it comes to values. Can I throw in a couple other values-related arguments you made? Okay, there was one, a lot of times when people talk about diversity, especially here in Massachusetts, I think they talk about it like the benefits are self-evident, like it's good for its own sake, so you should embrace it. She made an argument in that speech to the Senate that I hadn't heard her make before, an economic development argument for diversity, basically saying if you've got teams of people working on really tough, thorny issues, like the ones we're all going to be working on in the years to come, diverse workforces do better because diverse workforces that are based in places that allow their members to be fully who they are, fully and authentically themselves, are going to get better results because of that freedom. Sort of saying this is why it will work better from an economic point of view, which I hadn't heard her say before. She also was making an argument saying, essentially, I talked about the types of industries that maybe both Massachusetts and Ireland have. She was saying, we both prioritize industries that accomplish morally commendable goals. We're fighting climate change. We're developing vaccines that save lives. So that's a way of, I think, making Massachusetts sound good, also making Irish companies feel good about the work they do, while also suggesting that there's a commonality that could bring them over here.
Not just on the values, but about how the values contribute to the economy.
Yep, exactly.
And when we hear the governor make those kind of values-based pitches here, the pushback that we do get locally tends to be along the lines of, well, it's great that you believe that and your politics are like that, but how am I supposed to live there? How am I supposed to afford housing, childcare? How can I be my authentic self at work if I can't commute there in the morning through the traffic? Were you hearing any of those arguments from the people she was speaking to in Dublin?
You're right. That's the pushback that we hear, especially because we've got tens of thousands of people moving out of the state. We're losing residents. So there's clearly a tension there, or it's not as simple as she might like people to think it is. I didn't hear anyone making those arguments explicitly in the public events that I went to. Someone did mention to me after a public tech event where the cost of housing didn't come up, and I said, hey, I thought that maybe that would be an issue here, something that would be discussed. Someone after that event pointed out to me that tech companies want to go where the best talent is, and that they are able to compensate their workers well enough that even though they might not be able to get as much bang for their buck, for example, if they were to come to Boston as if they came to North Carolina, generally speaking, the financial pressures for people working in that industry are not going to be as strong as they are for people maybe who aren't making that much money. There was, at that same event, a tech leader who said, hey, our workers, they love the diversity here in Dublin, and they also love being able to take public transit to and from work. I thought that there might be a discussion of challenges that we're facing with the T here. That did not occur publicly there, but I wouldn't be surprised if at some of the closed events that I wasn't able to attend, if maybe Healey talked a little bit about some of the challenges that she might not have wanted to highlight in a public setting.
Sure, able to be a little more candid.
A little more candid, and maybe say something like, in all honesty, you need to know that the last administration left our public transit system in much more of a mess than I expected. We're working on it. Again, that's just speculative, but if she wanted to make a point like that, it'd be more comfortable making it in a closed press environment than an open one.
Sure, that would make sense. So we've talked about the policy side of it. Let's talk a little bit about the politics of it. There was another major anniversary she was commemorating, which was of John F. Kennedy's trip to Ireland. And we actually have a little bit of sound to play from her speech to the Irish Senate, where she invoked John F. Kennedy multiple times.
President Kennedy said 60 years ago, "The supreme reality of our time is our indivisibility as children of God and the common vulnerability of this planet." We have a different understanding of our planet's vulnerability today, but this truth remains unchanged. If we embrace our shared destiny, then we will not only meet the climate challenge, we will also demonstrate the unity this world needs to meet all of the challenges that confront us.
And so there's obviously a lot of similarities in a Massachusetts Democrat of Irish heritage visiting Dublin. But the notable difference is that JFK was president, Maura Healey is a governor. Are you able to read any tea leaves about her political ambitions or how she might be positioning herself in the national political arena?
I've been trying to think through the sort of political upside for her after this trip. One of the Irish senators, after she gave that speech, suggested that if in fact she were to find herself in the White House one day, like JFK did, perhaps she could extend the members of the Irish Senate the same hospitality that they had showed her on that day. And, of course, my ears pricked up because here's someone speculating about a Healey presidential run. I don't know, though. We don't know what the governor's ambitions might be beyond being governor. And I don't know if a trip like this, I could imagine it if she wanted to run for higher office down the road. It's part of her political resume now, right? She's able to say she addressed the Irish Senate on the 30th anniversary of the decriminalization of homosexuality there. And she's been able to work on themes, or was able to work on themes in the trip, like the ones we heard her working on there, invoking JFK, that could be part of a speech to a broader audience down the road. But I was not left after watching this trip thinking, oh, get ready to say goodbye to Governor Healey after one term. She clearly wants to move on to bigger and better things. And I don't know. I mean, if an Irish senator would like to see her in the White House, that's notable. But there's so many other questions to weigh before. But I mean, my thoughts went in the exact same direction as you when I heard that.
Yeah.
Was pricked up.
What kind of reception did she get? Was it what we see here, where it's a huge major visit, like if a president comes to Ireland, or?
It wasn't. There was a lot of attention paid to her appearance, which you mentioned a moment ago at the Irish Emigration Museum about the 60th anniversary of Kennedy's speech. That was a big event with a few different people speaking, including Claire Cronin, the U.S. ambassador to Ireland. It was very well attended. Healey was being interviewed by Irish media after that. But I think that I, maybe because of my Massachusetts provincialism, expected there to be just throngs of Irish media following her around as if she was president when she went on this trip. And in the first event that I went to at Enterprise Ireland, this group that works to help Irish companies expand overseas if they want to, I think I was the only member of the media there. And I was kind of surprised, thinking, okay, where are the local TV stations? Where are the newspapers? But as you say, it's a reminder that whatever might be in store for her down the road, however important she is here in Massachusetts, she is still a governor, and she was paying a visit when she gave that speech to the Irish Senate. She's paying a visit to the Irish Parliament, this national governing body. So it's not quite the same level for now.
Right, kind of like the situation here where you might have a foreign dignitary visit the State House, but unless you're caught in traffic behind their motorcade, you might not know what's going on.
That's I think, a reasonably good comparison. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, cool. Well, very quickly, do you think the people of Ireland had any thoughts about Massachusetts and how we're doing things here?
I can't tell you if they did beyond the very small settings that I saw Healey operating in, but I can tell you, I mentioned the senator suggesting she could run for president down the road. There was another senator who basically said, she is a very liberal, very progressive senator. She said, as the United States seems to have its democracy falling apart in slow motion, and we watch from here in Ireland, you're a beacon of hope in the United States political landscape. For the people she was addressing, the reception seemed really warm, and they seemed to like what the governor's doing and where we're at.
Awesome. Well, that's a really interesting perspective to hear. And Adam, thanks for, taking a moment out of your jet lag that I'm sure you're dealing with to come fill us in.
I am very happy to be here, and I'm happy to be on the other side of the desk talking to you. Thanks,
Excellent.
Katie.
Thanks for your time.